Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for being here at UnleashCon this year. And my name is Hans Kristian, and I'm going to talk about how NAV is using Unleash to ensure reliable rollouts of welfare services. It's a mouthful, but bear with me. So quick about me before we dive into the topic of hand here. I work at NAV, at this a team called a NICE team, where we focus on developer experience. I'm also a CNCF ambassador. I'm a Google developer expert. I'm a Grafana champion. And I also run a podcast together with one of my colleagues named Platform Podden. So be sure to check that out. So today we are going to give a little bit of introduction to welfare and the welfare system that we operate here at NAV. And then our journey with Unleash, and then some what benefits we have, and a little bit about the road ahead of us as well. So without going too deep into, but for those of you not from Norway, this is the Nordic welfare model that NAV, the Norwegian Labour and Welfare Administration, is responsible for. It's typically sort of summarized by sort of having very good social welfare, with income distribution, labor flexibility, strong workers' rights, gender equality, and also free education. And NAV is sort of being one of the safety nets that provide much of this to the Norwegian citizens. And we typically say that we help through all phases of life. So when you have a newborn, you get parental benefits. If you get ill, you get sickness or disability benefits, and you also get pensions and lots of other social services through NAV. And that's our main purpose here. Just some key facts here. We have code running in production that is twice my age, without revealing too much, but from the 1970s, still running in our on our mainframes. We actually hand out 1/3 of the national annual budget of Norway through our welfare schemes, so that's quite a lot of money. Not all of that, only a very short little fraction goes to the IT. Most of it we hand out through our welfare services. We have roughly 20,000 employees, which makes us the largest government agency in Norway, across, and have offices all through Norway. We have roughly 800 developers. That's contractors included. So that's roughly it's the number of seats we have on our GitHub organization, actually, which is basically sort of those who do anything with code, basically. And talking about our GitHub, we have crossed the 2,000 mark of public repositories. We really believe that since we are funded by the public, our code should be public as well. So we try to be as transparent, share our knowledge, share our code, because we really believe that the rising tide lifts all boats. But before we go into sort of the fun stuff, we need to talk a little bit about where we came from. So this is from one of my favorite books, The Phoenix Project, as you can see. And it sort of summarized NAV and a lot of other organizations, because NAV didn't use it wasn't always as fun as it is today. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you really see that, yeah, this is a really fun and thriving place to be. The picture in front of you here is not associated with the most fun. You have a sort of very silo-driven, you have some really hairy challenges, and you have this ball of molten lava that's just waiting to just pour out and kill everyone, I guess. But this was typically sort of any organization that's been sort of longer than a couple of years has experienced this, I believe. But really, NAV was particularly large, and it was sort of a constellation of different thoughts and political motives, etc. So it was really slow process. There were sort of quarterly releases, and you sort of felt that you were this small cog in this otherwise huge machine there, and you couldn't really do much about it. So then something happened, and this is the average weekly deployments per year. And this graph is actually rendered halfway through, even though it's so small that you can't see it. Because until 2015, we had quarterly releases, and I sort of imagine them sort of coming into the office, standing in line, and if something before you in the deployment queue broke, you had to go home, and because there was the cleanup crew had to sort of salvage the pieces and get everything back together. Maybe it was a giant floppy disk that they put into mainframe. Who knows how it went? That was before my time at NAV. But something happened. In 2016, we got new management. So by that time, sort of things had grounded to a halt, and sort of things were over budget and out of scope, etc. And we, the political parties, the government said that enough is enough. We need to start fresh. And we got new welfare director and a new head of IT. That was Torbjørn Larsen, who is credited to much of what's happening here. And in 2017, NAV actually hired its first developers. Until that, it was only contractors, and it was huge contracting business. It's still a huge contracting business, but we believe that we have balanced it out a little bit more and starting to hire our own people as well, and to balance out the equation. In 2018, we got our first Kubernetes clusters up and running, because we really saw that we need a new, better way to host and run and operate our applications. And this should really be something that the teams themselves can do and sort of be in control of their own destiny. In 2019, we got public cloud, and we started sort of not our migration, but we started sort of setting up and making it available for our developers. And you can see this graph is now going up. It sort of crossed the 1,000 weekly deploys per year mark in 2020, and then you can see it just continues growing here. We had an all-time high currently in 2024 with close to 2,500 weekly deploys per year on average. So we really see that there is a lot of going on here. There's a huge sort of movement, a rise in agility and speed, and sort of time to market is key here. Because what really happened was that we organized us differently. Instead of having this very silo-driven organization, we actually focused on the teams. We split them up into product teams, into their domains, natural domains, and sort of limited the number of people they had to interact with. Of course, there is also always some interactions, but we try to keep those connections fairly few, at least sort of in the day-to-day, and that you have to interact with others in order to get your own job done. And we gave a lot of we call them autonomous teams, because they have a lot of decision-making authority. And when you give someone decision-making authority, they tend to take decisions, which really what happened. They sort of up until then, it was really sort of like, oh, thou shall use this technology and this outdated thing here and that thing here. And once we sort of like, yeah, no, let the developer decide. We saw a lot of tools and technologies flourish at the NAV, and you can see that in front of you. And one of the tools that they fell in love with was Unleash, believe it or not. And to set this into perspective, remember the graph here. This was actually back in 2018 when we first set up our first Unleash instance. And actually, talking about 2018, I went through our Slack history, because of course we work using Slack. We need the best tools at NAV. And the Unleash channel here was created February 20, 2018. These people are still working at NAV and with a nice application platform, Kyrre and Kim Tore. And one of the persons that appeared very early on was the one and only Ivar Ørhus, who you all know from Unleash, the company. And this was back way before Unleash company was even a thing. He was still at Finn, and we got some really, really great advice. We had a couple of people from Finn joining NAV, so that was where they sort of got the inspiration, and we got the sort of first-hand experience as well to help us in actually getting this up and running. And so Eva here was really instrumental from the very first time, before we had this, before UnleashCon was a thing, before the company was a thing, and this was still a Finn project. And then let's look into the timeline here, because as I said, this started in 2018. I believe it was Unleash version 3. Then sort of there was a lot of internal adoption through 2019. Then sort of looking through the history there, I see sort of an increasing sort of challenge appearing towards the end of 2019. In 2020, we got new hardware. We moved our Unleash instance out to the cloud and got some better reliability, some better performance out of doing that. But then sort of the same thing happened, just sort of like on the next interval, that sort of there were challenges and rough edges, etc. We were still on Unleash 3 at that point. There were some talks in 2022 about sort of should we upgrade, or what should we actually do with our Unleash instance? Because there were clearly some challenges here. We had an outdated version by that point. Unleash v4 was already launched. And it was a single instance. All of the teams were sort of creating, all of the users. Remember, we have a lot of users. We have a lot of teams at now. It was sort of a mess there to know what are the active toggles, who is actually responsible for which toggles, and which can be archived, etc., etc. Up until then, Unleash didn't have API keys. So that would also be sort of a challenge that we had to sort of overcome if we were to upgrade to version 4. So we knew there would be some challenges here. So this was actually one of my early things at NAV, was to actually look into this situation here and sort of evaluate our options. Should we continue with Unleash? Should we look into other tools like Flagsmith or Growthbook? We actually have this documented, our sort of the comparison here, if you're interested. But we sort of saw that there was a lot of great things going on with Unleash v4. There were a lot of things. There were a solid project at that point. So we really felt that sort of Unleash would be a great fit going forward. So I and the NICE team created what we called Unleash Next, to take this to the next level at NAV. So the goal here was to get us from version 3 over to version 4, and also version 5, because that was sort of soon to be released, or at least in this period here. And it was a completely new look and feel that we really sort of had high hopes for. It required API tokens, so we knew there would be some challenges to overcome to support that in a good way, a nice way. And there were support for front ends that were really something that we wanted to look more into, and also having a better integration with the NICE ecosystem, the application platform here at NAV, was also something that we really wanted to look into, because up until this point, Unleash had been sort of its separate own thing and sort of disconnected with the rest of the application development ecosystem at NAV. Since we are running everything in Kubernetes, it was very natural for us to create a Kubernetes operator. So this would actually do two things. It would allow us to host the Unleash instances, because we need to have this on our own data centers for a bunch of different reasons. So we created this UnleashRater that sort of managed the Unleash servers, and we also created sort of a sub-service portal that would facilitate creating easy access and creating new Unleash instances, as well as sort of the supporting infrastructure that would be required around each instance. So UnleashRater would do these things that were inside the Kubernetes cluster, and Bifrost self-service portal would sort of do more of the external ones. And the model here would be that each team at NAV would get their own Unleash instance. So this actually works quite nicely. So once the Unleash instance is up and running, it sort of creates one. And then it sort of, since we have multiple clusters, it sort of has a federated model where it sends publishes a message that there is a new Unleash instance, and it's owned by this team here. So we create sort of what we call a remote unleash or a shadow unleash within their team namespace, so that the applications can connect easily to their own Unleash instance, regardless of where that might be in the world. And for the sort of human level access, we have something called identity aware proxy. It's a authentication proxy by Google and an extension, the Google Cloud, that sort of allows us to authenticate the users in a secure fashion, exposing our Unleash instances to the internet. And talking about sort of the authentication scheme here, once the request comes in, you have your user user session. You have a JWT token that's authenticated against our nice API that sort of knows all of the users and their role assignment before passing it on to the Unleash server. And there's also an SQL proxy that talks with the SQL instance hosted on Google Cloud SQL. And then sort of the application deployment, we knew that we wanted to make that a lot easier for the teams. We knew that we didn't want them to go into their Unleash instance, create a token, and then copy that token into all different places where it would need it. We wanted to have a resource that were more in line with how we are doing application development at NAV, namely as code. So we created a new CRD, that is an extension to the Kubernetes API, that sort of represent an API token from Unleash, where the teams could specify which environment would they specify they target and the name of the secret where it should be stored, and then they could mount that into their application in the nice platform. And very soon now we will sort of integrate this holistically, so they can just say that in their application, just give me an Unleash token and it will all be taken care for you without sort of dealing with the token creation itself. But at least they don't need to copy and paste any tokens around. So making this very, very easy and convenient for the teams to get up and running and get secure and authenticated access to their Unleash instance. So looking at how did this fare back in 2023, we created a roadmap. In April, we launched the first pilot. We had our API token functionality done by May. We had this beta quality ready by June. And then going through the summer, more and more teams started testing it out. And it was sort of proven enough to be considered general availability within NAV. At that point, we could start deprecating the old instance and then saying that Unleash 3 would be end of life by that year. And that sort of led to a quite intensive set of months where I was compiling the lists of all the teams and applications that were using various feature toggles, and then making sure that all of these teams were aware that the old Unleash version 3 server would be going offline by the end of the year, and that they had a clear strategy, either removing their dependency on Unleash or getting on with a new Unleash Next setup. And most of them opted on going to the new setup, which sort of was very nice to know. We saw sort of a slow and steady decline of our old Unleash server, and we saw sort of a corresponding increase on the new one. Unfortunately, I don't have that graph anymore. But what I have is this graph here. This is Unleash today. We see that we are doing quite a number of requests. This is actually from very, very early now this week, where you can see sort of the peaks during normal working hours, and then sort of a downtime during the night, downtime during the weekend, and then sort of a spike Monday morning in request to our various Unleash servers. Because right now, we run a total of 42 Unleash servers. That would correspond more or less exactly to 42 teams. We have 407 feature toggles. You can see various activation strategies, not that many using the segment feature in Unleash. And we have quite a number of active users. That would be developers that are actually in opening up their Unleash UI and then working with the interface in that way. So we actually see that there is quite a user base, and this is increasing maybe it's flattening out a little bit from the very early on, but certainly is a feature that is well used at NAV. And then ending up with an experience report, we have a team that's responsible for child benefits. They have a technology stack that is fairly typical for teams at NAV. They have a front end written in TypeScript and React. They have backends and multiple backends and microservices written in Kotlin and Spring. They use Kafka for asynchronous communication. They use Postgres for storing their user data, and it's running on GCP. They have sort of methodology that sort of continuous deployment, where they do continuous development and in small iterations using pull requests and merging them early into main as soon as sort of the code checks out and the quality of the code itself is sufficient. And then using Unleash to hide new functionality that is not ready to be released to the end users yet. They are using Unleash to provide extra functionality to some users, IG super users, by having lists and being able to dynamically sort of add users to that list. Rolling out new functionality to selected caseworkers. In some cases, you have sort of certain users that will be your beta testers and sort of are selected and you know and work with them to test out new functionality to prove that out. Rolling out new functionality to selected devices to test device compatibility, and also some kill switches in case of emergencies and providing better errors than just sort of something is failing down the line and not working. They also were able to share with me a success story where they actually were switching the payment order system. So they're paying out benefits, and they were able to do that in flight by sort of routing a percentage of requests to the new system and gradually increasing it as confidence grows using the Unleash feature togglings and the more dynamic features of A/B testing there. And with that, I sort of conclude my presentation here. I hope that by the end of the presentation that you can actually see that NAV really loves Unleash. It's a cornerstone and a tool that is loved by our developers and really sort of essential to how many of our teams operate, how they're building social and welfare services for the Norwegian population. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an amazing Unleash conference.